Have you heard about Johnny the Walrus, a children's book that trains 5-year-olds to bully trans kids into committing suicide? I'm not a very political person. I've never voted. My dad never voted. It's not that I don't think voting is important. It's that I usually don't care enough to get involved. I'm what you might call an I don't care-itarian on most issues. There are like 3 or 4 political issues that I care about. As for the rest, call me Bennett because I ain't in it. I understand that there are plenty of issues that are important to lots of people and to the functioning of society, but when I listen to one side and I think, I can live with that, and I listen to the other side and I think, I can live with that too, it seems that I'm fine either way. So I say the rest of you can figure this out and I'll just go on with my life. So, not terribly interested in politics, but I am interested in manipulation, especially mass manipulation. I'm really interested in how a small handful of corporations now control almost everything online and in entertainment and in finance, and how these corporations, which control so much of what goes on in people's daily lives, will push certain political positions onto the population and use mass manipulation and outright deception to do it. I'm really interested in how it becomes morally acceptable for one group to lie about the opposition because the opposition has been so thoroughly dehumanized that they deserve to be lied about. So you can lie about them, and even if your lie is exposed, no one on your side cares because the people you're lying about are so heinous. This is fun to watch. I definitely want to see where society goes with this. Now, I want to talk about Johnny the Walrus and Amazon, because Amazon is one of the small handful of corporations that have monopolized certain areas of daily life. But first, to give you an example of what I'm talking about, let's briefly discuss Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. If you go back a couple of months, I wasn't paying much attention to politics in Florida because I really don't care. Then I started hearing about Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, and I thought, wait a minute, Florida made some sort of law against saying the word gay? That can't be right. This is the United States of America. The government can't tell people not to say a word. Then I saw that it had something to do with schools, and I thought, oh, so the government made a law against saying the word gay in schools? They can't do that. This is the United States. Parents should send their kids to school and tell them to say gay and dare the government to stop them. Then I eventually heard what the bill's about, and I read the bill. It's actually called the Parental Rights in Education Act, Florida House Bill 1557. It's not long. It only took me a few minutes to read it. Most of the bill is about schools needing to inform parents about anything that could potentially affect the mental, emotional, and physical well-being of their children. The reason this is connected to LGBTQ issues is that certain cases came to light where teachers were having kids transition to another gender, but telling the kids to hide it from their parents. Schools were helping kids transition and letting them decide which bathroom to use, which locker room to use, and not involving parents in any of these decisions. Parents found out about what was happening, and they raised an important objection. They said, hold on. You've asked my daughter if she wants to start using the boys' bathroom and the boys' locker room and to stay with the boys on field trips. That's something that could potentially affect my child's safety. And not only are you not telling me about it, you're encouraging my child to hide this from me? So, Florida lawmakers passed a law saying that schools need to keep parents in the loop about these kinds of issues, namely, issues that could affect the mental, emotional, and physical well-being of their children. And there are even exceptions. For instance, if a child tells a teacher, I'm transitioning, but if my dad finds out, he'll beat me, the school doesn't need to inform the parents because doing so could endanger the child's safety. So, most of the bill seems pretty uncontroversial and commonsensical. The part that has divided the internet and America is this short paragraph. Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. Notice, teachers or invited speakers can't instruct students in kindergarten through grade 3 on sexual orientation or gender identity. Instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity in later grades will have to be based on what's age appropriate, and the Board of Education will have to come up with guidelines about what's age appropriate. This somehow sent corporations and journalists and educators and social media into a frenzy. The claim that teachers and third parties can't instruct kindergartners, first graders, second graders, and third graders on sexual orientation or gender identity. Now, whether you agree with this policy or not, think about why there's been such an uproar over it. Most people, Republicans and Democrats, agree with this. They say teachers should be teaching first graders reading, writing, and arithmetic, not teaching them their theories about gender identity. Most people agree. If you tell people what the policy actually is, most people agree with it. So, if you're part of the minority of people who disagree with it, what do? You misrepresent it to make it sound crazy. You label it the Don't Say Gay bill and claim that it's going to lead to the bullying and persecution of gay and transgendered students and that it's going to increase their rates of suicide. So Disney portrayed the bill as anti-LGBTQ. Disney, a company that controls a huge portion of the entertainment industry, didn't want to get involved at first, but they were pressured by the minority of people who opposed the bill to condemn it. The problem is that if you condemn it, you can't say what position you're actually promoting. If Disney wanted to say that they're against the policy and then explain what being against the policy would mean, Disney would have to say, teachers instructing kindergartners on gender identity and sexual orientation is fundamental. It's essential to the education of 5-year-olds, so we demand that teachers be allowed to instruct kindergartners on gender identity and sexual orientation. That wouldn't go over too well. Disney would sound even creepier than normal. So, what do? They use their resources and their alliances to manipulate people. That didn't work out too well for Disney this time, but it did work out well for social media companies. Social media companies make piles of cash whenever there's a controversy like this. Whistleblowers have accused the major platforms of favoring content that divides people and makes people hate each other. It's not so much that they favor content that divides people, it's that they favor content that produces engagement, likes and shares and comments and such. And the type of content that produces engagement happens to be content that enrages people. It's what gets everyone arguing. And the more people are arguing and condemning each other, the more ads are popping up in front of them, and the more data the companies are gathering on them. This is actually a perfect time to recommend a product. Healthy advertising is telling you about something that's good for you and makes your life better. When we go online, we think of ourselves as users and consumers. We use platforms and we buy products. But that small handful of corporations I keep mentioning, they think of us not as users and consumers, but as products. We're the products that can be bought and sold. More specifically, our data is the product that they get to sell. They gather our data and they either use it to steer us where they want us to go, or they sell our data to the highest bidder so that other companies can use it to manipulate us. What do we do about this? There are several things we should do about this, but the most basic and essential step is to get a subscription to Atlas VPN. Atlas VPN sends all your internet traffic through an encryption tunnel. It hides your IP address, even if you're using public Wi-Fi. It blocks malicious links, ads, and trackers. It monitors data breaches and warns you if your personal information or passwords have been compromised. It keeps you safe from people who want to steal your stuff. If any of this sounds confusing, I can make it simpler. The internet is like the world's filthiest, most virus-riddled whore, and Atlas VPN is like a condom for your data. If you sign up now, you can be fully protected for just $1.99 per month. That covers all of your devices with just one subscription. So click the link in the description box, download the app, get a subscription, and turn it on. Going from horribly exposed to extremely safe will only take you a couple of minutes. So get Atlas VPN and practice safe surfing. All right, if you signed up for Atlas VPN, your data is safe. Now let's make sure your mind is safe from manipulation. I don't know about you, but when a company like Disney tries to promote outrage by telling us a story and people become outraged, and then I find out that Disney deliberately misled us, I get into this boy who cried wolf mode. If I catch you lying to me, I'm not going to trust you next time you tell me a story. But notice, the people who are on Disney's side here, are they even slightly bothered by the fact that in order to produce widespread outrage about this policy, Disney has to misrepresent what it says? No, the people on one side of the issue think it's absolutely fine to misrepresent the other side if that's what helps them produce mass outrage. Keep in mind, this isn't to point a finger at one side of the issue. This is just becoming an acceptable thing to do. Whatever side you're on, no matter what the issue is, it's becoming increasingly acceptable to lie about the other side. And it would be one thing if it was some random person lying about the other side. It's something much more disturbing when it's one of the small handful of corporations that has the power to deceive millions of people and to marginalize and demonize millions of people. This brings us to another company, Amazon. Robert Spencer's book, The Critical Quran, was released recently. It shot up to #1 in the Quran category until I made a video pointing out that the #1 Quran in the world is the Critical Quran. People complained to Amazon. What did Amazon do? They removed the Critical Quran from the Quran category. So now people who go to the list of best-selling Qurans, because they're looking for a Quran, won't see the Critical Quran. So Amazon is pushing people away from the #1 best-selling Quran and trying to get them to buy a different Quran. Why would they do that? Why would a company whose job is to get products from the suppliers to the consumers decide to tip the scales in favor of certain ideologies? They do this all the time, by the way. And we occasionally get a glimpse into the decision-making process. Have you heard of Johnny the Walrus by Matt Walsh? It's a children's book, but it's been the #1 best-selling book on Amazon. I only heard about it after people started circulating a leaked video of Amazon employees frantically trying to figure out what to do about it. So, Amazon's version of the trust and safety team says that there's a major problem with one of the books they're selling.
It's about a book called Johnny the Walrus. And I want to be very clear, the next two are about books. And I saw someone say, oh joy, we're going to talk about one of them because it's been a very traumatic experience for transgender Amazonians and our transgender customers. Johnny the Walrus is a bit of a problematic book. Not a bit. It is not a bit of a problem. It's one hell of a problem. And I would preface this about what the book's about, but the customer we're going to listen to does a great job.
And then we find out what the book is about, not by reading the book, but by listening to someone complain about it.
It is teaching kids to bully transgenders. Yeah, to bully them into committing suicide, the LGBTQIA, especially transgenders. The story is about a kid who likes to pretend he's different things, and one day he pretends he's a walrus, and the community tells him he either has to be a human or he has to be a walrus, or they're going to kill him. He can't be both. He can't pretend anymore. You are selling a manual to how to teach kids to bully other kids to commit suicide.
As if writing a manual teaching kids to bully other kids into committing suicide weren't bad enough, Matt Walsh was bragging on Twitter about how glad he was that his book was going to help bully kids into committing suicide. I haven't seen these tweets from Matt Walsh bragging about getting kids to commit suicide, but if it's good enough for Amazon, it's good enough for me.
Now he is bragging that he has the #1 book. You are still going to continue to sell it. And now he's bragging and that he's glad it's going to make the LGBTQIA kids, especially transgenders, commit suicide. He's bragging about it on Twitter.
Here's the book. Takes approximately 3 minutes to read. It's about a little boy named Johnny. Johnny likes to pretend to be different animals, and his mom thinks it's great. One day, Johnny pretends to be a walrus, but then his mom finds out from the internet that it's not just pretend. People on the internet tell her that if Johnny says he's a walrus, he's a real walrus. You see where Walsh is going with this, right? So Johnny's mom takes him to the doctor, and the doctor tells Johnny that he has to start wearing gray makeup and eat worms and get an operation that will turn his feet into fins. Johnny's mom goes along with it for a while. She has him spend his day living as a walrus in a little pool in the backyard. Eventually, she takes Johnny to live with the other walruses at the zoo, but the other walruses don't accept Johnny. In the end, Johnny's mom decides to stop listening to the people who are telling her that she has to treat Johnny like a walrus. Now, whether you agree with the point this book is making or not, is this a manual for teaching kids to bully other kids into committing suicide? Whether you agree with the point or not, the point of the book is that it's unwise for parents to try to lock little kids into decisions they're making when they're 5 or 6 years old. Their brains are still developing. They're going through lots of changes. If a 6-year-old boy says he's a girl, that doesn't mean, as a parent, that you should start pumping the kid full of hormones or looking up surgeons just because people on Twitter scream at you and tell you you're a bigot if you don't. That's the takeaway. You can agree with it or not agree with it, but that's the message. Now, if you want to enrage people, should you give them an accurate description of the book? Of course not. If you run up to someone and say, "Oh my goodness, some guy named Matt Walsh wrote a book. The book is telling mothers of little kids not to let Twitter bully them into pumping their kids full of hormones and getting surgeries based on feelings the kids are having in kindergarten," most people will not be enraged even slightly by that. You can be transgendered and still think it's not a good idea to say, "My kid is acting like this when he's 5 years old, therefore I'm going to lock my kid into that with hormones and surgeries." If I were transgendered, I would still think it's a bad idea to start pumping kids full of hormones or getting them surgeries based on what they feel like when they're 5 or 6. So, if you tell people what the point of the book really is, it's going to be hard to enrage them. Even someone who disagrees with the book could still say, "You know, I don't agree with Matt's position. I think little kids should be given hormone treatments, but I understand Matt Walsh's point, and he's entitled to share a different perspective." Telling people what the book is really about is not a good way to enrage people. If you want to enrage people about the book, what do? You tell them that this is a manual for training children to bully other children into committing suicide, and that Matt Walsh is on Twitter bragging about how happy he is that this book will get kids to commit suicide. Now that sounds bad. That sounds evil. The most disturbing part of the leaked Amazon videos isn't the woman who's complaining about Johnny the Walrus. It's that it never crosses anyone's mind to question the ridiculous things she's saying about it. It never crosses anyone's mind to ask the woman, what page is that on? Where are you getting that? The book sounds like it's about people on Twitter bullying mothers into making decisions about their kids, not about bullying kids into committing suicide. So, can you explain how the book is promoting bullying or suicide? When the woman says that Matt Walsh is bragging about how his book will get trans kids to kill themselves, it never occurs to anyone to say, could you give us a link to that tweet? We'd like to actually read it before we become enraged about it. In the time it took Amazon to listen to the woman complain, they could have all read the book. And let's face it, they all knew what the book's about. If they really thought the book was a manual for bullying kids into committing suicide, they'd want to be able to show that by pointing out what it says. And again, it takes all of 3 minutes to read. They knew what the book's about. They knew that it's ridiculous to claim that Matt Walsh was bragging about getting transgendered kids to commit suicide. They knew that this was all total nonsense. And yet they all acted like the claims were completely true. Later, one of them even started crying for all the trans lives that would be lost because of this book. We live in an age when we don't just have people lying about each other in order to enrage one group against another. We've always had that. We live in an age when it's morally praiseworthy to lie about other people in order to enrage people against them. And it's morally reprehensible to object to a lie that your side is telling. In other words, if someone at Amazon had said, come on, I don't like Matt Walsh, but he's obviously not trying to get kids to commit suicide, that Amazon worker would have been attacked for defending Matt Walsh. He would have been blasted as anti-LGBTQ for pointing out a series of blatant lies. So everyone just keeps their mouths shut and goes on pretending that any insane criticism of the opposition is true, even when they know it's a lie. I'm sure I'm going to get comments saying, David, I can't believe you're defending everything Matt Walsh has ever said that upset me. Apart from defending the general idea that unless you're deliberately and obviously being hyperbolic or satirical, you should represent people's positions accurately when you're claiming to refute them. Apart from that, I'm not defending anything. I know next to nothing about Matt Walsh. In fact, I can tell you everything I know about Matt Walsh in a few seconds. I know he used to be a blogger because I think I read something by him on abortion years ago. I know he's with the Daily Wire now. I have a general idea of what kinds of views he must hold because I have watched videos by Ben Shapiro and Andrew Klavan, and I've read Johnny the Walrus. That's all I know about him. Matt Walsh may believe 487,000 things that I think are totally ridiculous. I do not know. But if I were to see some evil claim by Matt Walsh that was so awful that I needed to expose him, I would make sure that I represented him accurately when I exposed him. And if I couldn't expose him while representing him accurately, I might start wondering if anyone should take my disagreement seriously. On that note, I do have a criticism of Johnny the Walrus. When I see a children's book meant for kids 2 to 5 years old, and I find out that the book is really about transgender issues, I start to wonder, what kind of creep would want to instruct little kids about gender identity? What's wrong with this Matt Walsh guy that he's trying to indoctrinate kids with his views about transgenderism? But I can't say that because I definitely don't want Disney coming after me next. Looks like Disney supports Matt Walsh after all.